Good afternoon. Whoa. Sorry, I scared myself. Thank you for being here. This is a pretty interesting topic. Thanks to Ian for the introduction. As he pointed out, we're looking at here is OTT, and it's a question that I've asked, being a broadcaster, is as we hear about OTT and how do we get involved in it. If you were here for the previous presentation, you heard that it's not necessarily there to destroy. They were talking about cable. It's not there to destroy any industry, but it is certainly disruptive, but it can also enhance. So what we're going to look at is some of the different ideas and mechanisms and methodologies you can do to deploy an OTT service in a way that lets even a small local broadcaster or a local production company establish a presence direct to consumers. So rather than spend a lot of time talking myself, I'll introduce our first presenter, who is Ed Pippin. Ed is the founder and CEO of InstaDigital. So without any further ado, Ed, please come up and tell us about this.
Cool, thank you. Hi. As I was just introduced, we are InstaDigital. So we supply a full end-to-end video-on-demand platform as a service. So for years, we were building bespoke platforms for people. But over time, the key decisions, the key factors, the key questions that we kept getting asked again and again was, how do we get the cost down? How do we get to market quickly? So we decided that we were going to come up with our own platform, something that was ready, that we could put in front of people, that we could show people, and they could get to market very quickly. So nowadays, we take content, we encode, we transcode, we dash things, we DRM, we put it into our Insta library, which is a content management system. And then we put it out to front ends, whether that be an existing front end that you've already got or one of our Insta storefront front ends. As long as it's IP, we can push it out to it. So why are we here? Why are we all here today? Not in a metaphysical kind of way, but why have we got jobs where we're working in the TV and film industry? And I think it comes down to two things. It's either love or money, or if you're lucky, a healthy dose of both. Personally, I love what I do. I love working in this industry. I love talking to people about it. I love showing people what is possible and taking them on a journey and moving them to where this market is going. And I think it's great that people are coming on that journey and that people are taking those first steps. And the key thing is, the OTT is here to stay. I think we've all proved this isn't a fad now. This is a multi-billion-dollar industry, and it's important that you get on board. And whether that be, jumping in or just talking to people and understanding how this thing works, that's why we're all here. So, the key question that people face when they're looking at moving into the OTT industry is, do you develop a platform from scratch or do you take an existing platform? This is a dilemma that people have faced since the beginning of time. Does the carpenter buy his own tools or does he make them? Does a baker make his own oven or does he hire one? And in this day and age where you've got software as a service, the question is very slightly different. Does the IT company write its own sales software or does it use Salesforce? Does the digital marketing company write its own word processing software, or does it use Microsoft's? For me, the answer is really, really clear. Don't waste your time being something that you're not. Concentrate on what you do better than anybody else. Concentrate on selling your content, marketing it, talking to your customers, engaging with your customers, growing your customer base, and upselling your existing customers. Concentrate on your business, not the technology. Okay? Don't try and turn your technical team into OTT experts. They already have jobs that you need them to do. Don't take your eye off the ball and try and hire new guys to write you a video player that works on iOS, with Play Ready or some such thing that you've heard. Go to people who already know about this stuff and talk to them. You don't have to take everything from them. They may be just a part of what you are looking to do that they can do that is economical for what you're looking to achieve, and bring that on board and pull it into your systems. There is an argument to say that, well, we want to build it in-house. We want to add value to the company. But this is a really, really fast-moving industry. If you spend, 6 months, a year developing a platform, and you spend £250,000 on it, £500,000, whatever you spend on it, you're not adding that as value to your company, because in 5 years' time, that's going to be obsolete. The technology is pushing forwards. There's going to be new codecs. There's going to be new operating systems. You're constantly having to develop that. Let somebody else deal with all of that. So, go out and talk to... Didn't do it. There we go. So, but be careful. Not all platforms are created equal. Some are gargantuan towers of functionality, that have all these features and, kind of cool bits and buttons and things, and you can disappear down a rabbit hole of links. Look for what you're actually trying to achieve. Look for a proven platform. Okay? Go out and talk to the people in this hall. Look for the low price. In this hall, there are a lot of smaller companies. They don't have 10 salespeople stood on their thing. They don't have loads of television screens showing Hollywood content. But if they've got a great case study, go and talk to them. If they've got a great case study that is rolled out there, that is worldwide, that is absolutely fantastic, then these could be the guys for you. They're a small company. They will listen to you today and every day because your success is going to be linked to their success. Go out and talk to these small guys. They really, really want your business. So if you take one thing away from what I've said, just one thing, it's the rules haven't changed. Okay? It's still the same thing it was 5 years ago. It's still the same thing it was 10 years ago. It's your customers. Okay? You are the only one who has that relationship with your customers. Keep that relationship going. Let somebody else worry about the technology and how to deliver that experience. Okay. Thank you very much.
All right. So our next presenter will be Alex Hayward. Alex is the head of International Media and Entertainment Business Unit at Adobe Primetime. So Alex, please join us.
I'll go that way. Thank you. As I was kindly introduced, my name's Alex Hayward. I am the head of international for the M&E business unit. We are the part of Adobe that really thinks about how media and entertainment organizations can best use the technology that we're providing. The biggest thing to know about how we at Adobe see ourselves is that Adobe is all about the experience. We believe in creating the best experiences out there, whether that's creating experiences through our creative tools, whether that's measuring experiences through our analytics tools, or whether that's being part of one of the most personal experiences that you can have, which is video. Video is one of those things that is inherent to our bubble of security. We pick up a small device and we let a video into our world. And that's a very personal experience. And that's something that we feel incredibly strong about. And our core belief is that if we measure and we understand that experience, then we can bring tools to bear that will make that experience the best it can be. If I look back at our apologies for the slide. If I look back at our history in Adobe, in video particularly, in TV as a whole, we were really being talked to about the problem of fragmentation. How do I get video from A to B when B is tons of different devices? That was the problem that people were struggling with, that were looking to Adobe to help. And we focused heavily on that through our work with Flash and Access and those technologies. But now we're coming to a different point. These solutions, OTT is becoming more and more mature. The lines between OTT and linear are becoming far and far more blurred. So the question now becomes, I've got the service, I'm out there, what do I do with this? People are watching, I'm in front of them. So now what we're really looking at now is monetization. how can I monetize this experience, but in a way that draws the consumer in versus the traditional television experience of pre-roll, mid-roll, mid-roll, post-roll. And extending that even further, the final point says experience and personalization is how does this become a joined up experience? Video and TV is one of the strangest phenomena. In the old day, the broadcasters didn't really know who you are. They might get some information from a panel, but generally they were pushing content out into the world and you were sat there going, don't like that, don't like that, don't like that, and channel changing. Now we have deep understanding of what's going on through the OTT platforms, through set-top box data, through third-party data that collects data on our customers' behalf. So how can we wrap all that information, not just monetization, but a joined-up experience that understands you as a consumer? So that I know that when you come to a website, I know who you are and I can be personalized and relevant in a static way. And then when you come to that video, I can make that video experience as good as possible. Make discovery easy. Make finding new content interesting. Make the world, when you pick up your phone, something that you want to enter and be part of. And that's what we're passionate about helping our customers do. Because this is the most important point. We all know that they're on an iPhone, but what do we know about the person? Because devices don't engage, people do. And that's the thing that we're excited about with digital video and the emergence of linear into that world. So finally, it's to hammer home this concept of contextual personalization, both in the video experience, outside of the video experience, and the journey of that customer all around the service that they're within. And that is absolutely one of our core tenets, and I'm looking forward to exploring that more with the panel.
Thank you, Alex. And our final presenter before our panel is Dan Finch, and Dan is the Chief Commercial Officer for SimpleStream, a company that I hope is truly accurately named. So Dan, please join us up here.
Thank you, Bill. Afternoon, everybody. So I'm just going to take you through a whistle-stop tour of SimpleStream and what we do, and a couple of case studies. So this is really all about if you're owning content and you want to reach a new audience or understand your existing audience, then this is something that we can perhaps help with. So we've been going for 7 years now. We were 2, and now we're over 35 people based in London. The interesting thing for us is that all of our development is done in-house. So we, maybe similar to Ed and his business, claim that we can offer end-to-end solutions for broadcasters, content owners, and these are under these 3 kind of headers that we have here. The first one being our cloud TV platform, and the second, which I'm going to be covering today, but just for FYI, media flow is around syndication of VOD to third parties, could be websites, could be platforms, and then hybrid TV, more geared for the UK market, is actually around IP-delivered content for broadcasters in that space. So hot off the press, as in this morning. So this is the Q2 Barb report, really showing how the rise of SVOD services certainly are here to stay. Really interesting to see who's battling it out between the Netflix, the Amazon. But what is also very interesting is this line of any SVOD. So who is that? And perhaps could you as a content owner be part of that? It's certainly showing an upward trend, and it's set to continue to grow. So not everybody has $6 billion, which is the production budget for Netflix this year. Apparently it's going up to $7 billion next year. They obviously make their USP from their own in-house produced content. This is a really interesting stat just around the actual consumption of that content. But imagine if you actually own content not on that scale, but found a niche audience to look at that. So we don't have the perhaps the comfort of being able to fund 5 series of Breaking Bad, but what you might want to think about is if you wanted to launch your own OTT service, obviously content has to be up there, but also the reliability of the platform and how you can deliver it, understanding the various different business models that come with that. So to do your own market analysis, Obviously, with AVOD, advertising supported, you need huge scale and an audience that you understand to make it a viable opportunity. Subscription, again, perhaps you need a smaller audience, but with a monetization piece in there. And then for your live events, you've still got the transactional elements. Understanding from a marketing perspective as well, so obviously doing your homework, but also finding perhaps third parties that can actually bring something else to the table. Perhaps they're a publisher. Let's use fly fishing as an example. So I can guarantee that if you had a fly fishing subscription app that you launched internationally, you could find 10,000 people that would sign up for that service. But perhaps there's 10 magazine publications all about fly fishing that could also maybe benefit. You could reach their circulation and provide that service to them. And then more on the front end is actually how you deliver the service to the end user. So here we are in Hall 14. You can go around to all these different stands. You can go and cherry pick the ingredients that you might need for your own OTT service. Or if you're like Amazon, you just buy Whole Foods, and they actually do have their own supermarket as well. This is something that we have, and if you want to speak to me afterwards, very happy to discuss it with you. But we have a modular media management solution where you can basically pick and choose the elements that you might want to have. And then at a very high level, this is actually how we might acquire content, ingest either live or VOD-based services. So I guess what we're trying to say is that we have been in Hall 14 for the last 7 years. We have very good relationships with lots of different suppliers, and we, as a company, we focus, perhaps like Ed mentioned earlier, focus on doing one thing really well. So we're a software company. We're not in the hardware game. We're not in satellite business. We do build apps, but we're certainly not a CDN. So although our company is called SimpleStream, a little secret, but we don't actually do the streaming. We rely on Amazon, CloudFront, Level 3, Akamai, etc. to do that. But we're essentially the glue that brings it all together. So I've got 1 minute left, just to give you a couple of case studies for our sort of VOD in a box that we're announcing here at IBC. We've got, this is a service that we launched for A&E Networks. It does have a live element as well, but this is really about a free-to-air broadcaster in the UK that is embracing OTT to actually deliver box sets across multiple devices. So for us as a software company, we have a high reusability of our code base, so we can actually launch these services in a very short space of time. This one we did in a 6-week period. More interesting for us was actually to go outside the UK. So with MTG and their acquisition of Traceplay, we built a platform for them that had 10 live channels, 30 radio stations. It's got about 3,000 hours now of video-on-demand content. Theirs is a really interesting business model because they've got a consumer focus, but they've also got a B2B strategy as well. So it's, if you own the content, it's find that mobile operator that just so happens to have 5 million customers. You can actually give them the platform and then say, well, here it is. Here's the content. Here's the technology. You own the customer. And then off you go. So that for us was a 12-week project across 4 different devices. We have a stand here, stand 11, in this hall. So if you'd like to speak to me later, more than happy to have a conversation. Thank you.
All right, gentlemen, if we'll join me. And we've all been instructed to sit under our pictures so you can see how we've aged. So, interesting, OTT has been, I come from a traditional broadcasting background. So one of the things that's interesting to hear is this whole concept of focus on what you do well. One of the struggles I think I've seen from the traditional broadcasters, and I'm not sure about some of the newer folks, but broadcasting developed. You had to own the platform because, quite frankly, that was the only way you could get your content out. So there's probably a tradition or a history of people it's hard to let go of that. Has that been a struggle as you've sort of tried to encourage people to become more involved in this, especially traditional broadcasters?
Yeah, I think they all kind of wrestle with that buy or build scenario. So can their technical teams provide the service? So is it, do we have to go and hire 10, 15, 20 people? But I think technology has always been leading in that broadcast space. So I think for the smaller broadcasters, it would be very much like an outsourced sort of solution. But for the bigger ones that maybe have a more of an international strategy and 50 different territories, then they might want to look at perhaps something in-house.
So I was going to say, I think part of the challenge that you're facing here is you're dealing with people's livelihoods, you're dealing with people's jobs, and people are worried that if they let a company in to start doing some of this, then their power base that they've built up over the last 20 years will go, that they will eventually go, that there's this new technology that they're not sure about. And that's why these things take time. That's why there's inertia. Fundamentally, as you move forward, you're going to get people who are very used to dealing with things in the cloud, who have only dealt with things in the cloud. I got guys who work for me. They're relatively young guys, but man, they are so switched on when it comes to this sort of stuff. And they're going to get into positions of power, and it's going to be a no-brainer for them to go, yeah, well, why would we do this ourselves? Let's just use the cloud. Let's use this company over here, and let's look at what's good for the company and where the company should be going.
So you mentioned,
yeah, I was just going to add, I mean, if you look at the evolution of our experience with OTT, the business model is what drives this.
Mm-hmm.
So how am I going to make money out of this thing? Because it's not inexpensive to set these solutions up. And so very much initially, we tend to find with broadcasters is there's kind of a POC phase. Little skunk works project, we'll go and set something up quick and dirty and we'll see if people watch it. And then what do you know, people watch it and they go, oh crap, I've got to do something with this now.
Yeah.
And that, what am I going to do with this now, has to involve make money, because that's how these operations get funded. And so whether that's advertising or you're going to put an SVOD service together, that then drives the bigger investment in technology and the bigger business model, and it tends to go from there.
Well, one of the scary things for a lot of content owners is the fact that this stuff is cloud-based, and to this day, I think security is still you read it all the time. Security and the threat of losing what is your product. I mean, is this still an issue in the OTT world? I mean, or are you still fighting that battle?
I mean, I don't know about you guys, but we get in deep discussions about GDPR and the coming rules and regulations around data, and by definition, OTT services move data around, so you're going to know stuff about it. So you've got to be super careful about that. However, compare broadcast, which you're more than familiar with, head ends and satellite downlink buildings and big concrete buildings in the middle of nowhere that used to have to run, to a cloud-based IP infrastructure that is dynamic, that can be changed quickly. I think, with a caveat that we need to keep working on security, and that's clear, why wouldn't you take that change? Even for traditional linear broadcast, start moving to a more digital delivery platform.
Yeah, there's one thing I think around security around people's data, but another thing around the actual content itself. So I think that people are more embracing now, because if you look at something like Spotify, that has actually reduced piracy hugely, because people can't be bothered to go and rip music. I think that the video is also going down that way through subscription services. So
I mean, you mentioned personal data there. I think that's a key thing, but there are simple things that people aren't necessarily doing, and it doesn't matter whether it's on a server in your rack space or whether it's up in the cloud. You need to be really looking after that data. And if you've got it in the cloud and you don't have your router correctly done, or you're not storing the data encrypted in the database, then it's at risk wherever it is. It doesn't matter whether it's in the cloud or not. It's at risk. You just have to do those basics.
So in a way, it is kind of there's a two-edged sword, because you've got the content owner who is concerned about the security of their intellectual property, which is their identity, and then you've got the consumer who is just really concerned about their privacy and their identity. So the focus is sort of on both sides of this equation.
Yeah, I mean, I think when it comes to physical content, we all know that digital content is out there already. So, all the Hollywood movies you can get anyway. You just need to make it so easy, as we were saying about Spotify, is as long as it is easy for the customer, as long as that is their easiest route, then why would they go down this other path? And it's changed business processes, so that Game of Thrones gets released, almost exactly time on time with the UK, because otherwise there would be a week gap and people would download it and get it because they want it, because that's what the market wants.
So there's also a sense of I've sort of seen an impatience in the market. We've sort of seeded this expectation that I'm going to be able to get anything whenever I want it, wherever I want it. So the other challenge that I see is delivering. Again, being a traditional broadcaster, we started out delivering to the one box, with one, and now we're trying to deliver to pretty much anything, anywhere. That's a challenge just for creating the content and tailoring it to fit. Are there, as OTT services, are there devices that are more prevalent that we should be focused on first, or is it just sort of you really need to be in every space immediately? As soon as it's out, it should be available on any device.
Yeah, I think that would be a wise strategy given the commonalities now around sort of HTML5 apps and how you can port them across from different devices. So yeah, very much so. And end users, some prefer mobiles, some prefer tablets, so you have to be across these different devices. But I think what broadcast, well, by its own definition as being one-to-many, DTT, DTH has never really allowed for that return path data. So if you're a big broadcaster and you are spending £8 million a year on your satellite infrastructure, but it's a bit odd because you don't actually know who is actually watching your content, whereas you could invest a fraction of that in OTT and actually have this return path data that comes back from the end user, understand about your customer, understand about segmentation, retention, churn, all those different things. So this is why Hall 14 is 4 times bigger than it was 2 years ago.
Yeah, I mean, I totally agree. It's the opportunity to understand the behaviors of your audience like you've never been able to do before when you're with traditional broadcast. But the most important thing that our customers tell us, though, is that no matter what device you're going to, that you have consistent experiences, because that's what the consumer expects. They just expect television, and they expect their content. And it should be perfect, it should reflect the brand, and it should be consistent across wherever you go.
Yeah.
So one of the reasons why the OTT suppliers in this hall are really good is because we've already done that hard work. We're already on those platforms. So we were just saying then that people want to be on as much stuff as possible. That's because they already have habits. Yeah, they've been spending the last few years watching Netflix in their kitchen while they're cooking tea, or sitting on the bus in the morning watching it. These habits are now inbuilt, and if they want to watch your content, that's where they want to watch it. So rather than have to go through the rigmarole of getting it all up and running, and I'm sure your techie guys will say it's fine, it's not a problem, we'll get it up and running first time, it'll be a breeze. It won't. It all takes time, and we've been through the run. We've gone through that, and we've done all of that. Talk to us. We can get you up and running on these platforms really quickly.
So, and there's a great deal of value in that, because I mean I've heard a few of you say that the idea of building your own is just unless you're a huge operation, building your own is penny wise pound foolish, it would appear. So one of the challenges that we faced early on when we first started doing web-based video was the plethora of players, incompatible players that we had to deal with. I'm seeing a little bit of sort of one-off OTT type services. Is that a business? Does it make sense? Are these small OTT providers, are they sustainable, or are we looking at are we looking at them as grand experiments, and then if you prove they work, then you're going to move to a real provider?
Yeah, I think I mean, Ed mentioned earlier, there's lots of small companies here that do things really well, So there's companies that just do players, that's all they do, but they are very, very good. And so, there's one argument to say, well, why reinvent the wheel when you could actually just, go and collect the best of the best and bring that together. So, I think, everybody should be looking at these sort of, no offence to Adobe, but there are other players that can perhaps move quicker. We don't do players, but there are other companies that do. So, although Adobe are very good, of course.
Yeah, but I think I sort of tacitly agree with you that the opportunity for a broadcaster or somebody who wants to launch an OTT system has never been bigger. You've got ready to roll sort of solutions. You've got the OVPs. You've got player stacks. These things are all existing. We've got the HTML5 and Dash and CMAF standards coming, which will simplify the world even more. And we're massively supportive of that, because as soon as we can start to get delivery simpler and more standardized, then we can allow those companies to focus on the business model. And the business model, again, is what drives the investment, which drives these guys' prices. If you've got the right content and a great business model and it's a great service, you'll win. I mean, it's as simple as that.
Yeah, I mean, as to whether a lot of these smaller OTT companies will still be here, it's a growing market. There is going to be change. There is going to be consolidation. There are going to be people who are going under. But that's the same in anything that you do. Yes, you can pick some of the big guys, and the chances are they might be around a little bit longer than everybody else. But we've worked with huge companies that have gone bust. I mean, in the UK, we worked with Woolworths for years, and they were getting into digital video, and they were really doing some very interesting stuff, in the Middle East that you didn't really hear about. And then overnight, bam, they completely went. So there's no guarantees. It's all just like normal business with any supplier. You just have to, sign contracts with them, work out how to work with them, and have a recovery process if things do go pear-shaped.
Mm.
Well, I'm kind of curious because you said sign contracts. One of the interesting things as we move into the as a service world is the importance of your service level agreements. And so you mentioned we talked a little bit about players. I mean, if I'm a broadcaster, or if I'm a content creator who's looking for a distribution platform, and I think OTT is the way I should be going. What should I be looking for as part of my service level agreement? I'm thinking, okay, I want to be available on everything, but I don't want to have to figure out. I don't have to do multiple contracts so I get on every player. Is it practical for me to expect that in my agreement with your company or your company that part of that will be making sure that your platform is available, thus my content is available on new players as they come out, or you'll deal with the updates to the players that as they're happening? Is that something that just should be written in to an agreement, or is that even part of an agreement with?
For SimpleStream, that's exactly what we do. So we do offer these services with either back-to-back contracts with the much larger vendors or the CDN providers. And then the other part to think about is actually on the analytics. So obviously, if a customer is willing to pay to understand the analytics going right from the player stage right the way through to the acquisition, then when there's any break in the chain, you can identify that very quickly. So that's what we provide. And then as part of that service, you would get automatic updates when Apple do a new release, and other companies do as well.
And that's all transparent to you as again, I'm thinking of if I really want to focus on my core business, which is creating content.
Yeah.
I mean, I just want to make sure that my content is available to the customer, the base that wants it. So that's a normal expectation.
Yeah,
So,
absolutely.
Yeah.
I mean, operating systems on mobile phones and mobile devices are upgraded all the time, and it absolutely, positively has to work on those. And and we wouldn't be doing our job properly if it doesn't work on it. So we get advanced releases of things that we can test on stuff. There's always the odd chance that you might get something that's a little bit flaky, but you sort it really quickly because that's our business. it's our job to know all of those things for you and just get it fixed.
Well, and we talked a little bit about analytics. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off.
No, we don't provide a service.
Yeah, yes,
Yeah.
but you do analytics, and so to me that's sort of in this world, that's sort of the hidden gem, if you will. It's as we talked about earlier, broadcast used to just send it out, and you hoped people were watching,
Yeah.
but as a broadcaster, I can tell you that I know a number of our shows that were watched by the pets that were sitting there because everybody had left the room and they'd gone to do something else and just left the TV on to keep the dog company. So you'll hear people talk about that. You're hoping the dog had a rating book and was recording things, but typically not. But the analytics to me is the part that we really need. The traditional broadcasters, especially speaking from my peer group, but I think I think all content creators really need to understand is that the power is in those analytics. So I know we can talk about how the viewers, the stickiness of all those things, but we can get a whole lot more detail about it. What are some of the strengths that you guys see that are the selling points that you use for saying, here's what makes this service really, really, really worthwhile?
Right. So analytics as a concept is really huge. I think from our perspective, we're really trying to break down the barriers between this idea of OTT and linear. Right? People are watching your content through a different channel. It's still your content being watched. So we're working heavily on, all right, how can we partner to get that set-top box data, for example, to get that viewership? Because that's still the majority of the viewership is still linear, not OTT. And so we're very heavily looking at that relationship. And once I understand that and I understand those audiences, then I can do all sorts of things. I can forecast the likelihood of an audience that's going to watch a particular show. That has massive implications. It has editorial implications. Do I continue the show running? Has monetization implications? Can I sell advertising space around that? Because I know these type of people will watch it. We did an amazing project the other week about high-end sports events. Now, they always sell out for advertising. I have no problem selling out a Premier League game for advertising. But the problem is it's always to the same people and it's always for the same amount of money. Is there an audience there that I can find that I didn't know about that I can specifically target with a different piece of advertising? So the implications of now understanding that audience across all the delivery points through analytics and then activating that audience are huge, and we really are just scraping the surface. So when you sort of say what makes this sticky, it really feels like right now the OTT providers, the broadcasters, the operators are coming to us and are saying, all right, we're ready for the next step. We're ready for activating those audiences. We're ready to really make this our premier service.
Yeah, so I think that actually the market is still changing around this, and Alex made a very good point there, that you're suddenly getting all this data that you never had before. And it's like, well, what do I do with it? What do I do with all this data? I've got tons of it just sitting around. And it takes some very bright people to come up with ideas. So you were saying that actually, because I can identify, the age groups, the demographics of the people who are watching this, then I can suddenly upsell advertising because the advertiser is going to pay more because he really knows a lot about the person. He knows they're in this vicinity, as well as the age group, as well as just your general things that you used to get in the past. But then the other side of that is the marketing side of that is still catching up. So suddenly we're going, hey, we've got all this data about the people watching our kids' television channel. Can you give us something that is really focused in on this age group for this particular area? And they're going, well, kind of. I've got these kids' adverts. So it's taking time to catch up. But those people are willing to spend more money to get those adverts seen by those people in those demographics.
Just to add to that, I agree with all those points. But for the advertising market, when you look at where online was like right down here and TV was up here, suddenly there is this kind of balance that's coming out here. Because if you're the marketing director of Coca-Cola and you're spending all this money on glossy TV ads, and then there's just no return on that, no visible return on that, suddenly, for that sort of brand to actually get that engagement with their audience is much more powerful. So these sort of OTT services have an indirect impact on a much wider conversation around if it's advertising or paywall functionality or understanding your customer and churn analysis and how you win back customers. So it's really interesting to work with these smart companies that can provide those sort of analytics.
Mm-hmm. Well, that's sort of the fear that I've always had about this, because I think Ed, you were talking about there's so when you're designing this, there can be so many knobs and so many things to twist. You get so much data back, it's overwhelming. I mean, there's a reason. There's a reason AI is becoming a part of our lexicon, is because there's so much data out there that human brains just can't figure out how to sort it. It sort of reminds me in the early days of the internet, where we used to do 2-word searches just to see if you could find one web page or 0 web pages that had these 2 words on it. And you would put together these oddball combinations and still find websites that had these 2 words on it, and they have no relationship. So there's this overwhelm or this overload of data that comes in, and it almost becomes what is the agoraphobic, where you have so much information you just don't know how to move it all. And so I could see there's the potential for paralysis by getting this flood back. And so I think part of the experience has to be some guidance to the newbie into the OTT space of here's what we can, here's like the best practices or the important stuff that you should look at initially. Later on, you can do your deep analysis, but if you want to make good general decisions, here's what you should be looking at. And is that part of a package that an OTT provider provides, or is that a third-party service?
It's really tough. It's really hard to number crunch that sort of data. So again, it comes back to find a company here that just specializes in those analytics. Now, Google Analytics is actually very good up to a certain degree. I mean, it's excellent. It's free. You get to understand your customer. But then there's other ones that allow you to get more involved and give you data that you never even thought was probably possible. So once you've got your business model, if it's ad supported or behind a payment gateway, or if it's transactional, then it's about how you can then be smart with those analytics.
You can have free or you can have good. I'm just going to...
Yeah, I get that. I get that.
And occasionally you get the free one and say, we're still not getting what we need.
Exactly. And half the battle is collecting it, the other half is activating it. And I think, that's one of our core things at Adobe from the data science perspective. We are investing heavily in AI. We are investing heavily in machine learning for all the reasons that you said. We just can't physically get our head around all the things we want to do with data. So that's a massive part of it. I think the slight twist that we see on it, and it's that there are more companies ever than before that are branching into video. So telcos are now video media companies, and sports teams are now video media companies, and so you have to look at those businesses slightly differently. We can't just say video anymore. We have to look at it as a holistic whole, and that adds complexity, but actually in a weird way it can simplify, because you're now just dealing with one person or one entity touching a lot of different experiences within that.
Yeah, so one of the things that we all bring to the table is a shed load of stories. Just talking to us, just come up to us and talk to us and go, well, I've got all this data. I don't really know what to do with it. What should I be doing with this data? Then we start finding out about the sort of things that you do, and things will start going off in our heads. We're going, this other company is doing this, and I was talking to these guys yesterday, and they said that they can now do this. We're all learning at the same time, and we've got these great stories that we can bring, and we've got all these people that we're seeing here over this weekend that we're talking to, and we can actually connect things together. We want you guys to be successful. If you tell us what you're aiming for, what your business drivers are, then yes, we can pull out the data. Yes, we can put it in, nice graphs and make it look fantastic for you. But we can also, we can come up with those ideas for you to help you get from, I've got all this data, to this is the business requirement that I'm trying to meet, and we can fill that in for you.
So I just one last question, and this one's a little different, but it's this is IBC's 50th birthday. So will OTT ever displace completely linear? And if so, how far out in the future do you think it will be?
I think there's always a place for live satellite delivered services, but I think that is being eroded over the next 7 to 10 years. And I think that there's only a certain amount of perhaps spectrum that is available. And I know certainly in the UK, for example, when that spectrum actually gets released, there's other companies, big, massive mobile companies, like big red ones, that might come in and buy this sort of spectrum. Overnight, that means that potentially that has a huge impact on the reach of that traditional platform. So I think it's going to be a steady kind of erosion. But I think there's always a place for live TV, news, sport, especially.
Yep.
There's always that place. But with the compression technologies that are now here, low latency CDN, huge scaling that can occur. I think it's a matter of time until the broadcasters themselves decide, actually, do you know what? We don't need to be on there anymore. We can just do this over the internet. That will be the change, not the actual, perhaps the company that's providing the satellites. They're quite happy just to stay there. So I think it's when those come up for renewal, the broadcasters themselves, content owners will decide, actually, is this for me anymore? Can we make more money from doing something else?
I, with respect, actually think the question's wrong. I think the question is not when it will replace, but when will it merge? Because we have this sort of mental idea that there's this thing over here and there's this thing over here. And to be frank, the consumer doesn't care. The consumer just wants to watch their content. So I think what will happen is there's going to be one app, one EPG to the TV or the box or whatever it happens to be, and in there will just be my content. And some of it will be live, some of it will be VOD, some of it will feel like channel changing but is VOD. All these things will exist. The only thing that will be replaced probably is the old way of delivering these things.
Okay.
So we'll go to a standardized delivery platform. I think that's it.
Yeah.
Last word?
So I didn't want to be the guy who sat up here and said, oh yeah, it's all going to go, OTT's going to take over everything. People have done that over the years, and they said radio's going to be replaced by television and all of that sort of stuff. The difference there, the reason that those things didn't drop by the wayside, is they're different form factors. People like listening to radio. People like watching television. They do them at different points. With OTT and television viewing, if I'm sat in front of my television watching something, I can't tell. I absolutely cannot tell what it is. So your live, your news, that'll still be here. Everything else, if you're looking for a television program, it's going to be OTT. It's going to be OTT. And people may say, well, I like flicking through channels. You're going to have that on OTT. At the moment, you don't, because you have all this buffering. So you have to sit there, and Netflix starts playing it after 5 seconds or whatever it is. That's all going to go. You'll be able to flick through channels. It's going to be replaced. It's the transmission method that's going to change, and it's all just going to go out over IP.
All right. Well, thank you all very much for joining us. Thank you all for staying, and please join me in thanking our panel.